Hello, welcome everyone to our only video of graph lesson, graph in one video. In this video, we are going to talk about graphs theory that you need for an interview perspective, all in one video. What we are going to discuss, let's have a look. So, first of all, we are going to look upon what is graph and their types types of graph. Then after that, we are going to discuss representation of graph, how to represent a graph in coding format or in the drawing format. After that, we are going to learn about traversal of graph. In traversal graph, we are going to discuss two type of traversal that will include BFS, breadth first search, and DFS. And after that, we are going to solve some problem like rotten oranges, number of island, that is dependent upon these two traversal. So we are going to solve these two problems. After that, we are going to discuss topological sorting. In this, we are going to solve questions upon topological sorting also. And in this, we are also going to detect cycle of the graph. After that, we are going to discuss graph coloring. And after that, we are going to discuss after graph coloring, we are going to discuss about shortest path in graph. You are going to discuss three types of shortest path, like using BFS. Then after that, we have weighted graph using Dijkstra. Then after that, we have non-negative path that we are going to use him with Bellman-Ford. Maybe I'm not wrong, it's a Bellman-Ford. Then after that, we are going to discuss all pair shortest path also. All pair shortest path. After that, we are going to discuss about MST, minimum spanning tree, using Prims and Kruskal. We are also going to see about Floyd-Warshall algorithm. Floyd-Warshall. These these are the most important thing we are going to discuss and have some look upon it, and so we are going to solve questions among them. After these things, there are many more things like articulation of graph, bridges of graph. There are many things we are going to discuss. But first of all, we are going to discuss all these things. So these are the things we are going to discuss. Now let's move to our first lesson. What is graph and their types? So in terms of data structure algorithm, graph is a linear data structure. No, it's a non-linear data structure. What's the thing that differs between linear and non-linear? Suppose we have linked list. Okay, so linked list is connected to only one node. Okay, maybe it's doubly linked list, then after it will connect to previous node then next node. If you have a look on this, then then we can easily see that this node is connected to only one node. Okay, only one node. This thing is also connected to one node, but when you look upon tree, this node is connected with two nodes and there can be more. So this this difference is mainly differ between a linear and non-linear data structure. So a graph is a non-linear data structure. If we write it again, graph is non-linear data structure. Then also it contains vertices and edges. Vertices and edge. What do you mean by vertices and the edge? Like a graph is a non-linear data structure which contains vertices and edges. So suppose this is our graph, simple graph. Then these things. these things are my vertices, and these things are my edge. So we can say graph is a non-linear data structure which contains vertices and edges. Also, we can refer vertices as nodes. Okay, so we can call them also nodes, also vertices, also whatever you can call. So uh, if you are going to discuss, then we have some components in graph. So we are going to discuss what are the components that constitutes a graph. So components include first component that I will going to discuss is vertices, that I already discussed with you. What is vertices? These are the fundamental units of the graph. So vertex is the thing that is connected with each other, that is may or may not be connected with each other, but it is existing in the graph. So these thing marked with yellow are the vertices, and the red thing is edges. The first component vertices, then after that we have another component is called edges. These two are the main component of the graph. Okay, so I don't think you have any problem in vertices and edges. Then after that we have some types of graph also. Types of graph. We're not going to discuss all the type of graph, but we are going to discuss like major type of graph which we are going to discuss and which we will need the most. So suppose this I have a graph 1 2 3 4. This is the graph I have, and these are connected with this. So this is called undirected graph. What do you mean by undirected graph? Undirected graph means that a graph that have edges that don't have any direction. One is pointing about towards whom? Don't have idea. One is pointing towards two also, and two is pointing towards one also. So there is not a determined thing that okay, this is in the direction of this thing, or this is direction of another thing. So we have undirected graph. Another, if we have an arrow about this, like if you can say that one is pointed towards three, then this is a directed graph. Directed graph means that we have an arrow which we can generally say this, if there is arrow between 1 and 3, then we can say the one from 1 we can only go to 3, from 3 we cannot go to 1, so this is called directed graph. But in suppose this is the case with us, the 1 and 2 is not have any arrow between them, so we cannot we can easily say the from 1 we can go to 2, from 2 we can easily go to 1. But in directed graph we cannot say this. In directed graph we can only say that from 1 we can go to 3, but from 3 if you want to go to 1, at then at least one edge also exists that can have an arrow towards 1. So this is called undirected graph and directed graph. Then after that we have some we have also going to discuss some types of graph, but the main thing we are going to discuss is tree versus graph. Let's have, sorry, okay, now let's what is discuss between tree. Okay, let's have an idea. Tree versus graph. What is difference between tree and graph? If you notice, then a tree. What is a tree? Suppose this is a tree we have, and if you look upon this, that we can have. Suppose there are how many vertices are there? One, two, three. We can easily say nodes in the tree. Three, four, five, six, seven. There are seven nodes, and how many vertices or edges in there? So if we okay, let me take a pen. If we go to this is the first, this is second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So there are six vertices. Okay, this is very I think lightning color we have, and we can have yellow. I think where is the yellow thing we have? Let's think that we so these we have six is seven nodes. Okay, let me correct with thickness, seven nodes and six edges. So if you observe any tree, we have n minus, if we have n nodes, then we have n minus 1 edges. But in graph, this thing can not may or may not be happen. Like suppose we have a graph consists of 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the graph we have. And suppose there are edges there. So how many edges is there? So there are four nodes is there, and four edges is also there. So there are four nodes and four edges. Because this graph contains a cycle, that's why there are four edges. So a graph can contain a cycle, but tree cannot contain a cycle. Cycle means this thing. If you connect this or this, then it is cycle. So the primary difference is there is no cycle in tree. There can may or may not be cycle in graph. So, but what you get into this difference is a tree have n minus 1 edges, but a graph have n minus 1 also, and also many number of edge. So this is the mainly difference between tree and graph. So this is our first video for what is graph and what are their types of graph. There are some more types of graph also. We can have a look like a cycle cyclic graph. What we have seen above, a cycle, a graph which contain a cycle, a graph which contain a cycle. What do you mean by cycle? Suppose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have these nodes. Suppose from one node, we have edges between them. From one, we are starting from one, going to two, three, four. Then we can return to one. So from one node, from this node, we again move to node without visiting any edge twice. So what is the cycle graph? If from any one node, if from any one node, if from any one node we can visit again this node, visit again this node without visiting any edge twice, then there is cyclic, or there is a cycle in graph. So from any one node, if we are able to come to that node without visiting any edge twice, means that if we have visited one, we cannot visit two, then it is not a cycle. This is the we are going and returning. This is not a cycle thing. But if we are leaving the node from this path and we are returning from this path, we have not visited any edge twice. So this is the sign that this graph have some cycle. Then again we are going to have some, suppose we can directed and undirected. We have discussed cycle graph, we have discussed, I think we have also we can have weighted graph. Let's discuss one more type. So what is weighted graph? Suppose we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Suppose these things we have. Suppose this thing we have. There are also costs associated with. Suppose there are 2, 3, 8, 10, 12, 13, 15, 18, 20, 22. So if there are any cost associated with the edge, that if we are traveling 1 to 2 and the cost is 2, so this is called weighted graph. What we have seen upper is this is a non-weighted graph, that we don't have any cost associated with any edge, but there is a cost associated with every edge. So this is called weighted graph. So I think we are able to discuss. Let's revise once again that what we have discussed. We have discussed what is graph. A graph is non-linear data structure which contains vertices and edges. What is vertices? The nodes. The nodes of the graph is vertices, and the nodes connecting the line connected in two nodes is called edge of the graph. There are two main component of the graph. There is vertices and edges that we have discussed, and we have discussed types of graph. First type we have discussed undirected. Undirected graph, and there is no arrow between any edge. There is no arrow between two nodes. That we can easily go from 1 to 2, then 2 to 1. This is called undirected graph. But if there is an arrow associated with it, so we can one only go from 1 to 2, not from 2 to 1. That is directed graph. Then after that we have talked about difference between tree versus graph. A tree can have n nodes, then they have only n minus 1 edges between them. But in a graph may have n minus 1, or it may have n also in case of cycle. So a tree does not have any cycle, but graph is cycle. So we can say tree is a graph, but every graph is not a tree because a graph can contain a cycle. And after that we have discussed cycle graph. What is cycle graph? From any one node, if we are able to come again to that node but without visiting any edge twice, this is called then we can easily say this is cyclic node or cyclic graph. So a graph having cycle. Then after that we have discussed weighted graph. What is weighted graph? A graph that every edge have some cost associated with it, so we can say this is as weighted graph. Okay, in next section we are going to discuss about representation of a graph, like how to represent a graph. Thank you.